unstable mountain work. It'll be too hot, it'll be too cold, it'll be rainy, it'll be cloudy, it'll be all sorts of things. And as a geophysicist, you always look like a terrorist, and that's a photo of a typical hotel room for me with all those wires and chargers there. Generally speaking, the hotel service gets a little sketched out by it. On the upside, if I'm doing electrical work, I'm traveling with a generator, so I might as well bring a tea kettle with me. So down below, I'm in the middle of the wilderness. I'm about 500 miles from the nearest city, but I've got tea. All that you need is tea. And you get to see interesting locations. We've got a little bit too much contrast here, but rock face, and that right there is me for scale. That little chunk of yellow down there. So you do get to see some really, really fun places. And you get to work in really challenging landscapes. So far this summer, I've worked on, my worst slope was a negative 15-degree slope, so climb up the overhang and up over the top. But typically I'm more at 60 to 68 degree, like the gentleman over there is climbing up after me. I've gotten to work on a glacier this summer, and I will be doing marine geophysics work starting in December. I don't know where I'm going yet, but it could be Mauritania, Solomon Islands, Australia, or Japan. I'm not sure which, but I have a tiny 15-person company, and we're doing those 4 jobs, so I'm going to one of them. Just don't know which. And you get to work in all sorts of crazy weather. So up on the top there is one of my first jobs by helicopter, where that black stuff in the background are trees, and that's my helicopter pilot leaning out where the door should be to dodge the trees in the fog. So you work no matter what the weather is. On the other side is a thunderstorm coming in after we've planted all our dynamite, and we've got a bunch of geophones in the ground, which are essentially little lightning rods as well. So we were trying to get our job done before the lightning showed up. It was a little bit of a fast afternoon. Doing disasters work, you end up knee-deep in mud because you're climbing on a landslide 3 days after it happens. Or if you're working in the tropics, it can be really hot, really sunny, you need to protect your equipment. You can be, I had 143 millimeters of rain in 1 day so far this summer, and I did not win the company contest for most amount of rain. I got beat out by Jeff with 145. So you work in all sorts of conditions, and it can be really interesting getting to them. Again, I commute by helicopter for maybe 70 to 80% of my jobs. Aside from that, I do truck jobs and then stay in hotels and drive into the camp that I'm going to. I have so far had one job that I had to commute to by horseback, which was absolutely hilarious in every regard, of riding a horse off into the wilderness with all my gear stacked on. Because of all this, it means that we have really interesting hardware requirements, and this is where the MacGyver bit comes in. So we already did the James Bond villain of like, go out on a glacier and zap it with 2400 volts and have like the big red button, or go out into the jungle and blow things up, and total James Bond villain stuff. But where's MacGyver come in? Well, that comes in because you're working with really, really rugged equipment that should be weatherproof, you should be repairable, and you should be able to change what it does. But of course, people who build things aren't the people who use them. So you end up with a piece of equipment that only works if the display only shows up between 0 degrees and 15 degrees. So you have to find a way to heat it up. So you bring a hairdryer into the field with you to heat up your equipment so you can read it in order to do your job. Or you show up and geology is totally different than you thought it was. You can't do the survey you thought, so you need to change the gear that you have and rework it and change things around and do a totally different survey to get the same information afterwards. And of course everything will break along the way, so you've got to be able to I had at one point solder light bulbs together on a hillside in the rain in order to build myself a current generator to troubleshoot if it was my transmitter or my generator that was broken, and then repair my generator. So weirdly enough, my auto shop class totally came in helpful by stripping apart my generator and putting it back together again. And if I can't do it, then suddenly I'm costing my company $5,000 to $10,000 a day, and I'm off in the wilderness with maybe a satellite phone, so I've got to be able to figure it out on my own. So I make sure my tool bag is quite a fun tool bag with like WD-40 and dental floss and duct tape and then a bunch of resistors and all the things I think I'm going to need in order to completely modify or repair a system that's just shattered on me as soon as I'm off and isolated. There's also a couple practical considerations that I hadn't actually thought about when I went into geophysics. The first is, if you go into geoscience, you collect rocks. If you've ever tried moving with books, you know they're annoying. Now try moving with rocks. So I actually end up labeling boxes like rocks, seriously. These are actually a box of rocks, that's why it's so heavy. The next chunk is you're working out in the wilderness, which means you're going to have wildlife. And my favorite bear story from this summer is that we landed somewhere and we could smell a grizzly, but we couldn't see the grizzly. So we're like, oh, it's okay, we're going to be fine. We lay out all our cables and it's the end of the day, so we go home. We come back the next morning and he's chewed on my cable. But it's only superficial chewing. It was just like, what's this chomp chomp? Not damaged. So I'm going, okay, fine, good enough, we can do this. And I start doing my survey, and we get about halfway through, and then we leave and come back the next day. This time, he's in a full-on territory war with me and has taken a dump on my cables. Just very clearly marked his territory. And I go, well, all right, I'm almost done, let's just do this. So we're working and we're moving our injection point where we're putting the 2400 volts into the ground down the line about 100 meters every hour. And a line is this cut area of the forest. And it turns out bears are really lazy. So a cut line, which is easy for me to work in and drag my cables through, also turn out to be bear highways. So while I'm working down the line, the bear is coming up the line and meets my guys with their injection point. And my guys are very outdoorsy sort of people. I hire the locals from the community in order to help me out. And they've been growing up with bears their whole life. So they're calm about this. They fire off a bear banger, which is like a little explosive on a stick, and it just makes a big boom. And the bear goes, eh. So my guys retreat. And at this point, the bear now comes and cuddles into my injection point. So 2400 volts I'm zapping this bear with, and it's going, oh, warm, fuzzy, it kind of tickles. And I'm going, great, how am I going to finish my job now? I can't even pull my stuff out because I've got a giant bear there. So I call in the helicopter, and the helicopter comes and chases the bear away for me. And the bear goes bounding off into the distance. But then I thought, all right, the bear is clearly, this is his space, I shouldn't be here, finish up my survey, get out of there inside of a half hour. But I'm doing an electrical survey, which means I can't have my ground like right here, because I'm doing things to the ground here. I'm zapping it, that's the whole point. So my ground, my 0 point, has to be really far away. And the way you do that is you start at like 10 kilometers away, and you drag it out behind you, so it gets longer and longer. So I leave my wire behind on this line and go off and do my next line. Eventually the survey finishes and I come back to clean up all my wire and take it away with me. And I've discovered that the bear has decided to leave me a present in that he has slaughtered a moose and buried it in my wire. So I have antler and bone and fur and wire all tangled together. At that point you're just like, clip the wire, you can keep that, I'm going. So there is a definite wilderness hazard if you're working in the woods. And yes, I'm geophysics, but the same would be true with marine biology. You just have different creatures. Same would be true with environmental surveys. Same would be true with pretty much any of the outdoor jobs. If you do field work, you're going to run into your wildlife. Depends what country you're in, what wildlife it is. Personally, I'm okay with the giant mammals. I get much more freaked out in Australia where everything is poisonous and trying to kill you. The next problem was one I hadn't actually considered, which is, again, I work with explosives. So there was a job. I was on the hill, I was working, and I get a phone call from the company saying, we lost a crew chief, he sprained an ankle, you need to get out here and replace him. So they haul me off the hill and onto a plane inside a half hour. I've got my steel-toe boots, my high-vis vest, I've got detonator wire in my pocket. And luckily, charter flights, no security airlines, just walk right through. But I have to transfer to security airlines and go through a security point, at which point we discover I still have a machete in my tool bag. So I get hauled off for screening, and they do the little dabby-dabby, what do you have on you, and I glow bright pink because I'm covered in explosives residue. So I'm now at this point so seriously red flagged in the system that I can't walk past an airport without having a nice long chat with them. Luckily I do have a blasting certificate, so I was able to say, look, seriously, it's my job, I'm allowed to be bright pink. But that's a slightly bizarre consequence I hadn't quite anticipated. And because I'm here, I'm going to give you a tiny, tiny bit of dynamite safety, just because you might actually run into it one day. First, it looks exactly like it does in the cartoons. Second, it's actually pretty inert. You can like drop it, no problem, as long as it isn't sweaty. If it's sweaty, and that's exactly what it sounds like it looks wet and goopy, it's very unstable, run. Just flat out, that's it, just get out of there, and call whoever it is that does bomb disposal, because at that point it's just a bad time. Third, never ever touch it without gloves on, because you get nitro into your skin. And nitroglycerin used to treat heart conditions and all of that, an uncontrolled dose of it gives you the most crazy killer headache ever. So now you have dynamite tips that you can use at like parties and be like, yeah, I know all about dynamite. And also, if you ever encounter it, hopefully you will be a little less likely to do something silly. There's also side bonuses, which is, hey, you get to ride around in helicopters and totally feel very much like you're in a movie, and you get to go to absolutely gorgeous scenery and check out places that nobody can ever get to. So I personally love geophysics for that, because I